So the 5 secrets are are built on kind of what we call the EAR acronym, EAR, right? And it's all about listening, putting yourself in a posture where you're trying to hear and understand what the other person is saying to you, both on a kind of technical level, what are they actually saying, what the words are saying, but also on an emotional level. And that allows you to connect more deeply with them. So the first of the 5 secrets is called the disarming technique. And it's particularly powerful and useful when somebody is criticizing you when they're negative. And the idea is it's built on the kind of paradoxical law of opposites, where if you agree with a criticism, you actually end up putting the lie to it and you disarm them. So as an example, if I had somebody write in a feedback form to me once. They were giving me feedback. What do you like the least about the session? And this particular gentleman said, "You suck. I never want to see you again. You're the worst therapist ever." And here I was kind of the top ranked, team therapist in Canada. I'm thinking, well, how can that be true? And yet when I took a step back and thought, disarming technique, how can I agree with that? I realized actually it wasn't just a little bit true. It was completely true. Mm-hmm. You see, I'd missed something very important he was trying to tell me. And so I had to find some way of agreeing with him and saying, actually, you know what, when I read what you wrote there, it was hard for me to read because it was true. I did suck. I was kind of the worst therapist ever. And almost immediately when I responded to him in that way, he calmed down and then let me know more about what's going on. So the first one is hard to do, but you have to agree with the criticism, even though it seems ridiculous and absurd. And you will therefore then be able to connect more deeply with somebody. The second part of the empathy part, is the more traditional training we get in empathy training, and that is thought empathy and feeling empathy. And thought empathy is reflecting back, repeating back what somebody says to us using their own words. And so we actually capture what they say. So when I responded to this gentleman, I responded by saying, you know what, when you said, "You suck, I never want to see you again, you're the worst therapist ever," that was thought empathy. I was actually repeating back what I said. And the idea is that when I tell you I've got the message and repeat it back to you, then you know I actually got the message, right? It's kind of like the fast food, rule, where if you, I think there's a guy named Harvey Karp he's a pediatrician out of California who's designed this for children. And I picked this up from him, and he said, when you repeat back what somebody says, it's kind of like when you go through the drive-through and you say, "I want a burger, Coke, and fries." And the person at the other end says, "Okay, so that's a burger, Coke, and fries, sir?" That's thought empathy, right? Because now we both know we got the message. And it's important to use other people's words as accurate as we can so that they recognize, oh yeah, we're actually paying attention.
Yeah.
The feeling empathy part is guessing at what their emotions are, or if they've used an emotion word, and then bringing that out into the open by saying, "Oh, you know what, I imagine you're probably feeling pretty frustrated or annoyed or even upset with me. Am I on the right track with that?" And that's the E part. And the empathy finishes kind of with that inquiry. So disarming technique, thought and feeling empathy, and then inquiry to check in and make sure you got it. That's the starting point.
Yeah. So I wanted to interrupt here because, so that you can go through the rest of it. But I think that it is so important what you were saying about the disarming technique in finding some truth about what the person is saying. It's something I see in the hospital all the time, that there will be somebody who's very upset. I remember there's this one guy who he was leaving the hospital and he really wanted to have a coat. And I felt really bad because there was no coats that we could provide in the hospital. And, we had the social workers look into it and it was cold out. And so I really felt bad. But he was saying, this place is total garbage. You all don't care about me. You're not, how are you letting me leave without having a coat? And, if I would have come up with an excuse and said, I would have loved to, but we just don't have any, or,
we're doing the best we can.
We're doing the best we can. Yeah. I'm not, he's not sure deep down whether or not I really understand what he's saying. And likely what you'll see with people, when you're arguing with them, is that they tend to repeat themselves until it's clear that you understand it. So until you can communicate, until you can say, one, that you're right. There's, it is, we're not providing you with what you need, or, finding something true within what they're complaining about, and then, and then repeating back to them in their own words what their concerns are about this. Then it's clear to them, you understand, you've received it. And oftentimes that helps to bring down the argument, the energy, the anger behind it, because they understand now they've been heard, and you don't run into the same cycle of repeating yourself, one person battling against the other, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a much more efficient way of communicating, even though it seems like, well, we need to let them know that we're trying to do everything we can so they can understand. We're gonna, what happens is we end up getting kind of defensive when we do that, and we get into what I call explaining mode.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get defensive, then the other person will then be defensive back. Whereas if you let your defense down and go, oh, you know what, sir, you're absolutely right. This situation, it sucks. It's terrible. We're not actually providing what you need. And this is a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Right. And you deserve better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're sending the message you're important. What you say is important. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can provide it, but at least you're connecting with him and trying to understand where he's coming from.
Right.
And
I also wanted to linger a little bit on the empathy piece of this, and in thought empathy, which we just mentioned, and feeling empathy, where thought empathy being repeating back in the person's own words what their concerns are, what they're feeling, or whatever they're trying to describe to you, and the feeling empathy of going that next level of synthesizing really kind of what they're saying and trying to give an emotion about it.
Yeah.
And so, in this person who's leaving the hospital and they're not getting a coat and they need a coat, you can say, this must feel totally disrespectful to you, that you're not getting what you deserve or what you need, or that you must feel completely sort of discarded or unimportant to us. Doing that is really, I think, a powerful way to practice empathy in your own life, of really thinking of, how can you listen to what the person's saying and identify the emotion that they're experiencing, because again, it will go to they'll then understand that you understand them, and it helps to kind of deflate the anger or the frustration in the conversation going on, and help the person to feel more heard.
Yeah, for sure. You're connecting with them using thought empathy on the kind of intellectual level, right, on the content level. But with the feeling empathy, you're connecting with them on the emotional level, and that does go to a deeper place, right? And so, with this illustration we're using, saying, oh, you know what, I imagine this is pretty frustrating, for you, and if I were you, I'd be pretty angry about this because this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You'd have every right to be. Am I on the right track there? Am I hearing you? Right? And this is where the inquiry follows up with the feeling empathy, because we don't actually ever really know how people are feeling. We can get a sense based on their behavior, but to tell somebody how they're feeling rather than to bring it out in the open in a kind of inquiring way, that honors their opportunity to correct you. And that comes from a very humble position, right? I mean, as somebody who's been a therapist for many years, I'm actually pretty poor at guessing at how people are feeling and what they're thinking. And in our testing, which is one of the reasons we use testing, the research suggests that we're actually, you can get better at it, but we're all still pretty poor at it. And so when we do the feeling empathy, we do it in a way that really honors, what the sense is, what's going on, but also gives them an opportunity to clarify, right? Certainly this gentleman that wrote to me, you saw, kind of want to see you again. When I did see him again the following week, fortunately we had another opportunity. I said, oh, when I read what you wrote, you said, I saw, you never want to see me again. You're the worst therapist ever. That's thought empathy. And I thought to myself, oh, I imagine you're feeling pretty disappointed in me, frustrated, pissed off, even really angry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I said, am I on the right track? And he said, yeah, you got it, right? And then he kind of let me have it a little bit more, right? Because now we were actually conversing. He was opening things up by just honoring it. It didn't have to be defensive. Didn't have to explain why I messed up. I had messed up. I'd missed something important he was trying to tell me.
Mm. Well, awesome. So this is, the E part of that EAR acronym that you just mentioned. It is the empathy. So we can do that by beginning with disarming the person, by acknowledging the truth in whatever it is that they're describing. And then we can give thought empathy of repeating back to them what they've, described or said. And then the feeling empathy back to them. And then also by inquiring at the end of, am I getting this right? Or what else, what else am I missing here? What else would you like to add? That helps us to kind of flesh out the empathy that we provide at the beginning. What's the rest of the EAR?
Yeah, and just one more point on the inquiry. There's kind of two kinds of inquiry. The one kind of inquiry is checking in to see if you got the message, right? Did I get that right? Am I on the right track? That's one. And the other kind of inquiry is kind of the more open-ended. Tell me a little bit more about, kind of what you're thinking and feeling. That opens up the conversation for more, right? And judiciously placed, they either connect, very deeply, or give an opportunity to hear more about what's going on. And these don't necessarily go in any order, right? We put them in this order because I think it helps us to understand them and clarify and practice them. The next piece is the A part, and David titles this kind of assertiveness, although traditional definition of assertiveness would not apply here, because usually we think of assertiveness as how do I defend my position and state my position. And what David's referring to here when he talks about assertiveness is sharing how we are feeling in that moment and not hiding ourselves from it in a very open, authentic, genuine, but also humble way, right? So just as an example, with this gentleman who wrote to me, Yusak, I, would have shared, it was hard for me to read what you wrote. That's an I feel statement. It wasn't easy. It was difficult. And I'm feeling a little kind of disappointed in myself because you deserve better than that. And so I'm actually sharing some of my emotions with him. Now, in the professional setting, there's some balance to that. You don't kind of overshare your emotion. That would be unethical behavior. But in the context of our relationships, when we hide our emotions, it creates this barrier between us. And so we actually bring ourselves into the room with them. And this is a little bit contradictory to what would be more traditional, therapy training, or even I would say empathy training, where we're told it's all about the other person. Well, part of it being all about the other person is you allow them, the opportunity to be in the world together with you. And so we do share our emotions.
Right. And I think that, when somebody's talking about something, particularly about, feeling sad or depressed, it can feel very vulnerable. And so it can be very important to share what you're feeling as part of sort of encouraging this vulnerability and in making it, the sort of environment where it's comfortable to do that. Because, if you mention what you're feeling, then it's easier for the other person to mention what they're feeling.
I know often with people that come to me for help with anxiety, I'll do an I feel state with them when we're talking about how some of their friends or family members or other people will try to calm them down and say, oh, just calm down, it's okay, relax, you're going to be fine. And they smile when I say that, because it happens to kind of anyone who's been anxious before. And so my feel with them is to say, when that happens, I've had that happen to me. There's a part of me that just wants to, I want to punch them because I get so frustrated and angry. Do you ever feel that way too? And they light right up. They're like, that's exactly how I feel. It's because like their friends, family, other well-meaning, people are trying to be encouraging, but they're actually dismissing their suffering. They're dismissing how they're feeling. And so when I share and I feel with them, they're like, oh, you get it. Yeah, because I felt anxious too. When people tell me calm down, I say, you calm down, right?
Mm.
As opposed to going, oh, tell me what that's like for you when you're feeling the anxiety, right? When you have to, get into a car after being in that car accident. What's that feel like? I imagine it's terrifying for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had a friend who was killed in a car accident. There's certain highways that I feel anxious too.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instantly now there's that deeper connection because I've shared a little bit of mine to help open them up.
Right. Right. Awesome. So that covers the A, then in the EAR. What would be the last part of this?
Well, the last one is David's termed respect,
Mm-hmm.
and he defines it as telling somebody something that you genuinely value and appreciate about them and affirm about them. So kind of in a stroking manner, you stroke their ego in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he calls it stroking, and it's that respect, which can be hard when somebody's criticizing you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, the key when you do respect is it has to be genuine. Otherwise, it will fall flat. People will see right through it. And so you'll notice even when we started the podcast here, I said, that Dr. Nissen, was kind of a sign of respect, and that you were, kind of a real star in one of my classes, and I enjoyed having you. So the opportunity was great. That's stroking.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you feel when I said that?
Felt great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And when you complimented me, it felt good too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we have somebody who's struggling with kind of depression or anxiety, or addictions for that matter, we have to be a little bit careful that we're not getting into the cheerleading mode, trying to cheer them up by saying, "Oh, you're such a great person." That's too broad and general. It has to be specific,
Mm-hmm.
right? Somebody sharing with me that they're depressed and they don't feel like they're there for their family. I'll say, "Oh, it is so hard, isn't it?" Right? It sounds like you really do care a lot about your family. I admire that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's now stroking,
Mm-hmm.
because part of their suffering is because they value their family so much and they don't feel like they can be there for them like they would like.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to saying, "Oh, you're such a great person." That's not a good stroking. That's kind of just a general platitude.
Right.
So when we do the stroke, you can even do it with people who are attacking you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this gentleman who wrote the comment to me, when I responded, saying, it is hard to read what you said because it was so true what you wrote. I
Mm-hmm.
did suck.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel disappointed because you deserve better than that from
Mm-hmm.
your therapist. That's a stroking, telling him he deserves the best.
Mm-hmm.
And on one hand, it was hard for me to read. You wrote, on the other hand, it gave me a tremendous amount of respect for you,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to stand up for yourself. You're not going to put up with it.
Right.
And also that you trusted me enough that I could handle it. And I feel kind of honored that you would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly now I'm complimenting him for attacking me.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do it in a genuine. I was being genuine with him. I wasn't just kind of using words. And we went on to actually have a really amazing working relationship together. He's one of the most fun guys I've ever worked with. And when he shared his story with me, I realized, oh, well, it's no wonder he was so upset after I'd kind of glossed over something he'd been trying to tell me in that one session.
Mm.
And I still have a card actually that he wrote to me. Not many of my clients' patients write cards, but he actually sent me a card afterwards. And one of the things he said to me in our final sessions was, "You're the first person that's ever listened to me in my whole life."
Mm.
And on one hand, that was sad to hear. On another hand, it was an incredible honor to be invited into that place with him and be able to provide him with some tools and strategies to overcome some of the
Right.
battles he was facing.
So that's the last part of the trifecta then, of the E being the empathy, the A being assertiveness or really like disclosing what you're feeling, and the R being respect and showing respect to the person. So I think it would be good, to sort of close this out with modeling a little bit of how this would look. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot, I think I have a couple examples, and I think it'd be good to just model for everyone of how could you use some of these different techniques in your everyday life,
Awesome.
responding to people, as they're, describing their emotions to you. So
Yeah, and I love being put on the spot because this is exactly how we do our training. In fact, I've did a number of Facebook Live broadcasts with David where he did the same, and you can see my screw ups there where I missed
Right.
the mark, didn't do well, and so you can give me some feedback on how that sounded, and if I make some mistakes, it'll be great learning for me, and if we demonstrate some things that work really well, it'll be great learning for everyone else.
Great. Yeah. All right. Well, here's an example. So somebody comes to you and they say, "Ugh, my day was horrible. My boss is such a jerk."
Oh, yeah, it sounds like you're having a pretty tough day. You said your day was horrible, and your boss was such a jerk. I imagine you're feeling pretty frustrated and annoyed. I know I certainly would be if I were you. Tell me a little bit more about what was happening today.
Awesome. So as you just heard Mike do, he did the thinking empathy. He said, that he repeated my words back to me. My boss is such a jerk. And then, gave an idea of maybe some things I might be feeling, the frustration. And then he was saying he did inquiry at the end to try to get a little bit of more information. And, as you're listening to this, when I'm just giving short samples like this, it's hard to give a full, empathetic response with such a short story or such a short, sort of segment like this. So if anyone really ever has a brief complaint, or just sort of they show just a little bit of, I'm feeling very depressed, like something very short like that, you can just follow it with a little bit of the thought empathy, maybe a little bit of the feeling empathy, and then with inquiry and asking more about it, inquiring to try to get them to open up more is never going to hurt, right?
Such a key point you make there, Nick, in that you don't have to use all the 5 secrets every time. In fact,
Right.
using them all the time, every time would be an error. It would sound a little formulaic. David often refers to the 5 secrets kind of like the keys of a piano, and you've got the 5 keys or the strings of a guitar, and I'm a musician, and sometimes one well-placed note can be just powerful and magical if it's appropriately done. And sometimes the most simple, music only has a few notes played,
Right.
and other times you play them all to their fullness.
Right.
So if you leave one out, that's okay. Now, if you consistently leave one out and never use it, it'll show up then in your communication, and people will pick up on it. So you might want to practice that one. But
right. Well, here's another example. You're so selfish and don't really care about anyone except for yourself.
When you say I'm so selfish, I don't really care for anyone except for myself, it hits home, because I think you're pinpointing something that is so true, something I know I struggle with. I sometimes get caught up in myself, and you've nailed on the head. I'm guilty as charged, and I imagine that when I'm like that, it's pretty annoying to you, pretty frustrating. I know I get annoyed with myself, and I feel a bit disappointed because you're important to me, and it's difficult when we have this disconnect. Am I hearing you right?
So that was a good example where Mike was able to use disarming, and he said, "You're right," and that, I think that's often the case when there's a taste of sort of anger in what the person's saying, of acknowledging that they're right, and they are right, that we all get caught up in our own lives, and we fail to really care about other people probably as much as we should. So that was a great example of disarming, as well as some of the other forms of empathy and some inquiry.
It's hard to do because you have to set your ego aside, right? You have to set your defensiveness aside, and that comes with intense practice. And for me, my kids, my family have been fantastic at helping me develop. I often give the illustration. My daughter, when she was about 10 or 11, my kids are teenagers and adults now, but I would be kind of listening to her, and she would say, "Dad, don't give me that psychology crap." And because I was practicing the 5 secrets, and what she was saying is, nice try, but you didn't do them very skillfully. You were trying to do, thought, empathy, and disarming technique and stroking, but you missed the mark.
Right.
And when that happens, it's such a cool opportunity, because then you just fall back to the 5 secrets and practice them again. And so my response would be, oh, you're right. You could tell I was kind of practicing my psychology skills, right? I wasn't really listening to you. And I bet that's pretty annoying to you, isn't it? She's like,
Right.
yeah, can you just be my dad? Yeah, you just deserve to have your dad right now. Okay. And then all of a sudden she just started talking again, right?
Right. Yeah, it's if there ever is any part of it that is disingenuous, people will sniff that out. And so it's a skill for all of us to continue to develop, of really admitting our own mistakes and really being curious about what the other person's feeling. Because otherwise, if you're being formulaic and you're not honest about it, people will sniff it out.
Yeah. And certainly when we do our practice, when we do our training, we grade each other. We say, what grade did I get? Was it an A, a B, or C, a D? And that's hard, because you got to set your ego aside to get a grade.
Right.
And then we talk about what did we do well? What worked? What felt good from kind of a gut level and a technical level? And then how could it be improved? Right. And you'll see David do this, if you listen to David Burns' podcast and he's practicing, he'll say, what grade do you give me? And because he's always wanting to learn. And he's the master of it. So.
Right. All right. Well, one final example here. So
yeah,
I give up. Life just isn't worth it.
Oh, when you say you give up and life just isn't worth it, my heart sank a little, because it sounds like you're feeling pretty hopeless and pretty down, and it's a dark place to be. And I wonder if you'd be willing to tell me a little bit more about what's going on for you, what's happening.
So that was another great example where, it was brief what I said to Mike, and he was brief in what he said back to me. He didn't need to do everything. But one thing that you showed there was saying my heart sank a little bit, of sort of modeling that, the assertion, or the sort of modeling the self-disclosure of your emotions, to keep it in sort of a vulnerable sort of mood and encourage the person to say more. Because you've really gotten so little information from the person, but they're clearly feeling something so profound. So, do your best to try to get out more from them so you can better understand.
Yeah, just hear where they're coming from. And even when you say my heart sank, well, there's a little bit of a disarm in there. You're like, oh yeah, it's true, right? You're in a dark place. This is a tough place for you to be right now. And that makes sense. Tell me more about what that's like for you.
Yeah.
I'd kind of be honored to walk in this place with you if you'd allow me. Right.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I think that this has been such a great little whirlwind tour of cognitive therapy, team CBT, and really, I think, some things that a lot of people can benefit from in their everyday life, of how to show better empathy to others, and how to, change our thoughts so we can feel better and live better lives. So before sending everyone off, do you have a way that, people that could get connected with you or the Feeling Good Institute or the work that Dr. Burns is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been such a good time hanging out with you, Nick. I'd be happy to do it again any time. The best way to get connected, there are really 2 websites where all the information can be found. The one is the Feeling Good Institute, so www.feelinggoodinstitute.com. And you'll see all the training options there. A new website's going to be launched in the next few weeks here, and so you'll see some cool new changes there. And then Dr. Burns has his website, feelinggood.com. And he has a ton of resources in his podcasts there. I've done a few with him. You can kind of search and look me up there. And then one final kind of shout out to David, and full disclosure, I don't get anything from David for promoting him at all, other than when he comes to Canada, he does buy me lunch. So that's my kickback for, but his new book, Feeling Great, with some of the more updated motivational aspects, was just released this past fall and is now available online, Amazon, and I think it's in e-reader as well. And so I'd highly encourage you to check that out. But yeah, feelinggoodinstitute.com, and All of our trainings are there, and they're available. There's a number of free training if you're looking for CE credits, for those in the medical profession. If you're just looking for a few CEs, there's a number of free offerings on there that give some of the basics as well as some more advanced training if you're interested in taking on. I have quite a number of medical people do take my course and class, because they often say we sort of did a brief section on empathy, and a brief rotation, but man, I feel like I could really use more. And some of them are some of the most kind of brilliant, wonderful, compassionate people, and it doesn't take long with some practice, if they are willing to kind of set their egos aside and do it, and they do wonderfully. So love to have them part of the courses.
Awesome. Well, one other plug I would say is for any human being out there, but in particular those with depression or anxiety, or supporting those with depression and anxiety, Feeling Good is such a great place to start. And in fact, that's how I got introduced to Dr. Burns and his work, and later to Mike, is through that amazing book that a psychiatrist I know would suggest to all of his patients with depression and anxiety. So check out Feeling Good, the Feeling Good Institute, Feeling Great. These are, I think you'll find them all to be very helpful. So Mike, I wanted to thank you so much. You are extremely talented, extremely smart, and at the same time so humble and approachable, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show. You're just such a good teacher, and you're a great teacher for me, and I'm sure everyone today has benefited from your great teaching, so thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to give you an A+ on your stroking with the 5 secrets right there, Nick. That was well done, and certainly my journey began with a physician giving me the book Feeling Good. And in many ways kind of owed my life, to that physician, and to Dave, except got my start. I'd done my undergrad degree a number of years before, but then I made the shift back into doing this type of work. And now we offer kind of online therapy as well throughout Canada and the United States. And I have the privilege of kind of offering that to people who, may not have access to it. And so you can check that out on feelinggoodinstitute.com as well.
Great.